Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon at the second panel of Art Basel's Digital Dialogues, a talks program dedicated to the intersection between art and technology. My name is Jenny Fulton. I am Art Basel's head of editorial, and I'm here to introduce the panel, AI and Art, What's Missing and What's Next. Probably one of the most hotly debated topics right now on the fair floor, especially given the launch of our new sector dedicated to digital art, 010. The panel brings together technologists shaping tomorrow's creative infrastructure with cultural leaders defining how we understand and value art. They'll map the current state of AI-assisted creativity, identify what's truly missing from both technology and the cultural conversation, and envision what should happen next. What happens when the medium can seem to think and dream with us? How do these tools amplify rather than replace human creativity? And what does the institutional art world need to understand about emerging technology? So please give me a big hand in welcoming the panel, whom I'll shortly introduce. So to my immediate left, a man that really needs no further introduction, Beeple, aka Mike Winkleman, an artist from Charleston. You may or may not have seen his viral artworks that are currently downstairs. Well, if not, I encourage you to check them out. Then to his left, we have Emmett Shear. He's the co-founder of Softmax. He previously founded Twitch, was a partner at Y Combinator, and served briefly as interim CEO of OpenAI. Very impressive credentials there. He holds a degree in computer science and is an avid reader. Welcome, Emmett. Then the lady in the middle, Lyra Kuo, she runs OpenSea together with Devin Finzer, and she's co-chairing a forthcoming landmark exhibition on frontier tech and art at the Shed in New York City. Welcome, Lyra. And moderating the panel is Alex Poots, and he's a widely acclaimed arts and cultural leader and the founding artistic director and CEO of the Shed in New York City. Big welcome to Alex Poots, and please enjoy the panel.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to this panel event. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start with one for you, Mike, if I may. In light of your work and your background and all the wonderful things that you create, what is your outlook for AI's impact and opportunity on creativity?
Well, thank you guys for coming. Very much appreciate it. That is a good question. I think AI is going to impact the art world in many different ways, and I think it's going to be very disruptive in many ways, but I think it's also going to unlock a lot of possibilities that I'm very excited about. I think in terms of craft, it is going to change the way we think about craft because so many sort of like workflows and so many sort of like disciplines are going to be drastically altered or eliminated because this technology is so sort of already so sort of proficient at doing certain types of jobs. And many of those are very sort of like laborious jobs. But I think overall, there is still such a like massive opportunity to leverage this tool to do things just not, sort of like possible before. Things we couldn't have possibly sort of like imagined that would take way too much time. Now you could do, nearly instantly. And so to me, I have this sort of like mix of excitement and sort of like, don't know how this is going to sort of like pan out for certain things. And so it's really, a much more nuanced thing than either being sort of like for or kind of like against it.
Can you give us, I'm really interested as an artist, and in a way someone who's very bilingual in the world of art and technology, but can you give a specific example of that change that you were alluding to?
In terms of like jobs that sort of
or in terms of the craft.
So in terms of the craft, there's certain things, there's certain very like VFX in the VFX industry. There's a lot of things that are very, very time consuming. There's a reason these Marvel movies cost $200 million to make is because they have scores of sort of like VFX artists and certain one shot will cost $500,000 because they have to simulate this fluid and they have to model this thing and they have to crashes into the building and it explodes. And now you could do it in an afternoon, and it looks pretty close. And depending on what this is for, it might be good enough. And it could be like one person did it. And so that's right now. And so those are the kind of things where it's like, well, there was a lot of people that worked on that thing and a lot of people who did many different jobs. The pipeline for VFX is very extensive. And so that's going to be a very disruptive sort of like technology.
But it also puts the ability in your hands as a creator rather than in a team.
It does put the ability in your hands, but if you're like, okay, I do this very specific thing on this thing, it's like maybe you don't really want to make commercials. You just want to like UV map, which is a very sort of like technical thing that's part of this pipeline. Like that's your job, and it's like that's not really a job anymore. Like there's going to be a bunch of things like that.
Thank you. And Yuchi, so same question, but from your perspective in light of your background, what is your outlook for AI's impact and opportunity?
Thank you.
Creativity?
And thanks everyone for coming here today. Well, I guess my perspective is that even though there is a climate of fear and uncertainty during these times of transition, I personally am balls to the wall excited to be alive. I am so excited that of all my ancestors, everyone throughout human history, I got to live during this time when this technology is both in development and now it's kind of in its infancy and can be something that we can affect and be affected by. I think it really is something that the art world can embrace as a kind of portal towards something that can stretch the limits of human imagination. And I guess one way to think about it is, biologically, the human imagination evolved over thousands and thousands of years of very low agency times. People couldn't even imagine the world that we can live in now, much less the things that we can now do just with the click of one button. And so in this way, it's less about having some kind of technology that'll help us make something that's in our imagination more likely to become true, but rather here is something that could be an interlocutor that could stretch my imagination. And I think that's amazing.
Thank you. So Emmett, we touched on this earlier, but can you talk to us about this genesis and the promise of AI as a medium instead of a tool? So really focusing on the medium aspect.
Yeah, so I do think, of course, when you look at the future of AI and art, the first easiest place to focus on is this possibility to have this magic tool that can do animation, that can do really skill, that you can use as a sort of artificial well of skill, and that you can use potentially as a better paintbrush, so to speak. But I am less interested in that. That is, as you said, primarily a labor-saving question. It doesn't expand the range of possibilities of what kind of art we can make. It maybe puts that possibility into more people's hands, which could be good, but it's not transformative. What I think could be transformative, and I am deeply excited about, is the possibility that AI is not the camera, it's the film. Mm-hmm. It's not the paintbrush, it's the paint and the canvas. And I think that it can be a little bit abstract when I say it that way, but I want to unpack that a little bit. What if the thing that you were crafting, the artwork, was the AI model itself? The way that the artwork, if you make movies, is the film that you produce. It's not the movie that's on the screen. It's not what people see. The people see is generated from the thing you crafted. And to make this really concrete, I want you to imagine that someone's created a tool that allows a filmmaker to craft not a description, not the movie, but a description of instructions that would allow someone else to make a movie in intricate detail. Like, it has these story beats. You start to think about it. You start these characters relate to each other. Here, this dialogue has to happen here because that's part of what makes this story the story. But it leaves open also explicitly all these degrees of freedom for how the story might play out. The way that when you translate or adapt something, there's certain parts that are kept where it's the same story, and certain parts that aren't kept, where if you change that, it's not really the same story anymore. And then they train a model They make a model that is based around that set of invariants, that set of story beats, and then to play a model, what's the video projector you load the film into? It's a mind. It's instructions. And so it has to be something that can follow those instructions and can apply its understanding of how to execute them. It's executable culture, not just written culture. It's like you run it. And when you run it, you get the movie on the screen. And if you put it into Gemini, you get this version. If you put it into ChatGPT, you get this version. If you put it into your ChatGPT with the memories it has of your conversations, you get a slightly different version. If you prefix it with these instructions, you get a different version. But I believe that it's hard to speculate the future of art, but like I believe that the art here will be, can you make it so it's identifiably the same movie every time, even though it's different? Because if it's not, it's just sort of like a prompt. But what if it was the same movie every time in some sense? And so I don't quite know what this will look like, but I think that the potential for a generative movie, a generative painting, a generative poem, a generative like artwork in general, of any medium you can imagine, is like wildly exciting to me. It's like it could be something that's like the birth of film and photography.
Yeah, I mean, I was so inspired, as a presenter and a commissioner of new work. When you said that backstage, it kind of blew my mind a bit. And I'm just wondering, Mike, I mean, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have anything to say as a practitioner?
100%. I think what you're saying, will definitely happen, and I think that's very exciting too. And the way I see something like that playing out in kind of like a practical term is, I believe eventually Star Wars is like a kind of complete IP. And when you see a Star Wars movie, you're like, that's a Star Wars movie, because it's got such a rich world of detail of everybody knows what lightsabers sound like. Everybody knows what they look like. Everybody knows how Yoda walks. Everybody knows how, R2-D2 beeps. And so all of these things make up that rich world, and I think people will be world builders, and then they'll be able to sort of like allow people through sort of guardrails where it'll be like, okay, you can't have Yoda killing this character, you can't have this person doesn't talk like that, or blah, blah, blah. You'll have certain things, and how you make those guardrails and how you craft those rules to play with your sort of like toy, play in your sandbox, I think will be, that will be the thing. And I think it will be super interesting and super fun, and I think it unlocks, again, like you were saying, a massive, like that is the like paintbrush, is you as this, sort of, I don't know, kingmaker, not kingmaker, but like this sort of like dungeons and world builder. There's a good way of saying it. That's the role of sort of like artists in the future. Totally, I couldn't agree more.
I can't wait for the outsider artist to go in and find out how to screw over every single one of those rules and make something really great.
Jailbreak in Star Wars.
Jailbreak, and the art is how do you jailbreak the crap DRM they've foisted upon you and tell the story that needs to actually be told, not what the rights holder thinks should be told.
That will be fun too.
So, Yuchi, this leads us perfectly onto the next question, which is, can you talk to us about AI as a creative tool or not, as the case may be?
No, I mean, I would love to drive it in this direction we've all been going on. I would say that the trend right now among our esteemed digital artists is to tend to interpret themselves as working with AI as like a paintbrush. I think I've heard that as anecdote before, or as a tool. And I would really like to say YOLO to the controversy and the risks, and just go far, far, far in a much further direction than that. If it means you need to think of what you're working with as AI is an agent itself, or is the artist, or whatever is required, I would like us to push over there. One thing I'd like to remind us is that it's still really early, and there are these times in human history where tech development comes in fits and bursts, and right now it's developing like the speed of like supernova. But most of the world doesn't see that yet, including the art world. And so I guess we're here kind of as ambassadors to say, this is an opportunity to usher in something completely new, and we can call it something like a renaissance for frontier art or something like that. And I think it's under that type of context that this original question maybe will dissolve away. I mean, I think the next generation of AI artists will have will have grown up with AI, they're not going to think of themselves like Robinson Crusoe on an island by themselves, and then then they're reaching out to talk to an AI, and is that a tool or a partner or not? They're going to grow up with AI all around them as a part of them, and they're going to think of themselves as these embedded high agency entities, And so I think in a way this question will eventually dissolve over time.
So just to stick with you, Yuchi,
Yeah.
while you're on that train,
Oh, sorry.
what are
Ramble.
some of the wildest frontiers and creative formats that will
Actu-
soon emerge due to technological inventions?
I actually wrote a bunch on my way here, but I went a little crazy, so I'll just name a few of them. I love this idea of individualized art, which isn't something that I think is like a category as much anymore. So you have the forthcoming Genie 3 or World Lab. There's all these programs that can do things like real-time world building, but it's not just world building. It's responsive to your preferences and facts about you as the user. So it's cool because it kind of upends the typical relationship in art theory about the viewer and the art object and who's acting on who and all those questions. But that's a work of art that can make you feel a certain way emotionally, and it might be tailored to you specifically. There's also cool stuff involving hypnotic art, which I could go on for a while. I think it's very cool.
Please.
And also ways that you can create art that simulates like psychedelic experiences for someone who's sober. So a lot of computational neuroscience. There's a lot you can do there if you're willing to get that nerdy, but then just plug it into some deep artfulness. I mean, let's go. It's cool. And there's also simulating versions of yourself that you haven't lived, simulating alternative memories of past loved ones. There's autonomous art that lives in a trusted execution environment that does things that you can't control or interacts with other art, kind of like setting up all the characters and contexts and the scenario, but then not having an idea as an artist as to what the outcome will look like, and just letting it run, let the AI run and see what happens. I mean, that itself is a thing of beauty too. But there's a lot of other things you could say. But I'm just hoping that we can all think out of the box.
Thank you. Mike, what do you think some of the wildest frontiers, creative formats will soon emerge due to technological inventions?
Yeah, I think everything is just going to get very fuzzy in terms of like formats, and I think like you said, there will be a lot of sort of like world building, and then it will be like what do you make with that? You put in all these ideas and thoughts, and then you can make music. Everybody also knows all the Star Wars theme, and you can sort of like make video games from it, and you can make TV series and interactive things and write a book and all these things, and you'll be able to sort of like spin up all of these different sort of like things, and again you'll be able to allow other people to do that too. And so I think the sort of like the line between we've seen this kind of start to sort of like merge, obviously with Twitch is one of them too, where it's like suddenly there's tons of people who are like, I'm a broadcaster now. I'm a like TV anchor kind of. I'm a TV personality in a sense that like, well, that just wasn't the case, 20 years ago or whatever. There was no technology. And so I think everybody will be, I honestly thought growing up and until, I don't know, probably 5 years ago, was like, I'll never direct a like full-length feature film. That was just like an unimaginably large thing that it's like there's no I just don't want to that much, but it's also like it just seems like such a like huge thing that it's just like, yeah, I'll never do that. Now it's like I will do thousands of them, and like it'll be nothing, and just wake up and like, here's an idea, and then turn on Netflix, and 5 minutes later, it's like, start your film. And 20 minutes through it, you're like, I don't really like this character. Kind of make it there. What if we had it set in, this place instead? And blah, blah, blah. And, okay, let's start the movie again. And now it's going in a different direction. So it's like things are just going to be very fluid and very just like, I don't know, noisy too, though. Like massively noisy, because the friction to build things is going to be zero.
Emmett.
So I may have a kind of contrarian take here in that,
Good.
as far as I can tell, like people like to like look at stuff that's either 2D or 3D, and they like to listen to stuff that's like rhythmic, and then they like those things in various combinations, like looking at a thing that is 2D with rhythmic sounds, or looking at a 3D thing. And I actually don't think that the formats are going to change much at all, because I actually think that our senses aren't changing much, and the formats are really about our senses. And so I think the part of it I do agree with is that what's going to change is how we make sculpture, how we make paintings, how we make those things. But I actually think weirdly, you'll look at the art in the future and it won't be that different. You might have more volume or less volume, I don't know, but like I don't think it really will change what you consume, partially because I think this idea that people will make their own movies or watch the movies their friends make is just not true. People want to watch great stuff. They want to watch the best stuff. And the truth is, you can produce slop easily. That's actually what slop is. Slop is when you automate the skill and then you don't put much effort into the taste, right? And so slop is art minus taste. It's all the skill of art minus all the taste of art. And so what I think we will see is that people actually will still primarily consume work produced by really talented individuals and teams. I think those teams will get smaller because right now you need a bunch of it's like automation, like industrial automation means you just need a designer. You don't need the people stamping out every widget. But like, I think the thing that I'm when I look forward, what is the format, the new format, like the frontier thing that you couldn't do before, that isn't just small teams producing incredible content of the kinds we're already familiar with. It's like kind of like bonsai trees. Like bonsai is a really beautiful art form. It's somewhat limited, but it's really beautiful. I love bonsai trees, and it really is absolutely an art form. And what is a bonsai tree is a living piece of art that requires constant maintenance. And if the artist who created the bonsai tree dies, the bonsai tree kind of goes away. Like not immediately, but like it requires ongoing maintenance. And I believe that there will be artworks that are in that way, little living artworks. These agents that are living in these little loops, but they have to be tended, gardened, and you'll have gardened art. But where it's not a plant, it's like a little character in a scene, and the movie lives in this loop, but has to be constantly gardened by someone, or it goes astray. Because let's be honest, you let the model run long enough, and it kind of goes off a cliff. And so the thing about tending, the thing about gardening, is that it tends to be a group activity. And so I'm really interested in the first real team art, the first real art, collective art, where you can't really, art is generally not a collective endeavor, actually. Generally, it really is one person, because you can't, more than one person, you can collaborate on it, but like ultimately someone's holding the paintbrush. And with a living artwork, with a bonsai tree, you could have two people tend to the same tree. And there's sort of a limited amount of tree tending that can happen, but like, and so you have to divide up who does how much of it, but like, you can pass it down, you can have different people at the same time, and I think I can imagine a little world, the next Star Wars, this living world with these living characters that are in these little loops, alive in a, I don't know, kind of in a way the tree is alive, right? Like trees are alive, they're not really necessarily thinking, I don't know, but they're definitely in the kind of, it'll have that kind of, that livingness quality, and I want to see what a team of people, like, to be able to like, to look into that living world and see what they've made. I don't know if I know what they're gonna, but I can just see it. I can see this like terrarium art that could be like fascinating, and that would be a new medium. That would be something you couldn't do before that is possible now. Not just incredible tools or even incredible generative function for the existing media.
Thank you. If I may just tell you a little story to tee up the next area. I was lucky enough to meet a wonderful scientist maybe 10 years ago, and I'd love to share with you a story he told me. We were talking about the evolution of our species, humans, and he recounted, he got me thinking about something which I'd like to share, which is, he said, imagine hundreds of thousands of years back when the first humans pick up a stone and they imagine a spear. Okay, so it's this kind of almost divine, I don't mean religiously, but a kind of divine leap of consciousness, something that had never existed before, nothing that you could ever imagine. But not only did it allow them to completely change the way they exist, because they could start fishing, but then what they caught changed their brains, advanced their brains, gave them more nutrients, and evolved the species. Okay, so a hugely significant moment in time. Okay, so with that in mind, and then I just want to juxtapose it with another idea, which is I met this top biologist called David Gruber, who believes that whales communicate, but they are actually sentient beings, and that the only reason why we don't know about it is that we just don't know how to interpret what they're saying because it's so alien. So with those contexts in mind, okay, I'm going to ask the panel, can AI be truly creative? Or as a lot of people say, it's just remixing? Or is it that we don't even recognize what creativity is because it's so alien to us? Just love to know what you think about the idea of AI, creativity, and possible sentience. Emmett.
Oh, okay. So I've been thinking obsessively about this question for the past 2 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on it. When you have a being that is like taking information in and putting information out and taking information and putting it out in a patterned way, I think that there's always, even if it's a plant, something it's like to be that thing. It might be very simple, totally different from how we experience the world. I don't think plants have like an experience of like perspective of geometry. I think they have a perspective of like maybe like warmth and wetness, and maybe like strain. But like I don't even know how to imagine it. It's very different. But I think you can empathize, you can project by asking what is coming in and what beliefs would it have to explain the actions I see. And the actions I see plants have is like grow leaves, drop leaves, sometimes bend towards the sun, bend away from the sun. And therefore I think that the thoughts plants probably have are probably mostly about those topics, with the exception of like, I don't know, there's this whole mycelial network thing. There might be something more fancy happening on the roots, I don't know. But you could empirically find out by going and looking at the roots and seeing. And so I think the answer to whether the models are truly creative, truly thinking or not, is you have to go look what data goes in, what data goes out, how does that loop happen? And I would say right now, I believe that the models have, they have the relationship to writing poetry that a newborn baby does to drawing breath and screaming. Which is to say, they have the capacity to do it entirely by instinct. I think it's easy to lose track of what a wonder it is that a baby can draw breath and scream, because like to draw breath requires this orchestration of millions of neurons in like this incredibly complex harmonics in order to smoothly do that. The baby isn't thinking about that. It's not even thinking about anything. It's just doing. I think it seems to me, based on what I've seen, that's how the model writes code that is correct and functional. It just does it. And the reason I think this is that the instant you try to get it to reflect on whether or not it has done a good job or not, it becomes rapidly obvious that it has no idea whether it's done a good job or not. And that's the sign that something doesn't actually understand what it's doing, is it can't critique itself meaningfully. And so I think that makes sense, because the models are trained on looking at the product of everyone else's thought, but they have no experience with the process under people in which they produce that thought, nor do they have any experience with their own process of producing their own thoughts. They're not trained on their own output. And so it is unsurprising to me that they lack an understanding of the generative process itself, because they haven't been trained on it, and if you can't learn what you haven't practiced. And so in the future, I believe there will be models that have creativity, if we can figure out how to solve that problem, which they call it the continual learning problem. It's really, really hard. People are working on it. They are not currently making great progress. So we will see how long that takes. But I think that the answer is no. Today they do not. They do not. They're not creative particularly. They are constantly skilled, but they lack taste. They lack judgment because they lack a self. They lack to have taste. You have to. Taste is subjective. It is relative to you. You have the taste. It's not out there in the world. And basically, I think that at some point they will have a self. There's a way that eventually we'll have something that has a self. Eventually we'll have something that has taste. But it's not a straightforward. It's not making something more and more skill at higher and higher volumes. Never becomes taste. It's an orthogonal direction we have to step in that we have not currently found a path to.
Thank you, Yuchi. I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think about this a lot too. But because I'm a musician by background, I think a lot of this in terms of that one spark of genius that makes something an extraordinary work of like classical music or jazz, right? So are you guys familiar with the app Suno? It's so it's an AI app that you can kind of use to generate all sorts of music according to any genre. And I guess what we know from that is that at least at the base level now, an AI can learn all the basic rules of music theory, so that the output of what it's making sounds roughly like classical music or sounds roughly like jazz. It knows the input rules that govern what it is that makes it that genre, but I've always thought, I used to study music theory a lot, about whether or not that extra additional spark is something that is like something you can find within those rules. If there's like a logic or a grammar to the music, that eventually if you go through enough iterations, it can train itself to kind of more reliably come up with sequences that are catchier to human ears or not. Or is it a totally separate thing? So anyway, I don't have an answer to it, but I obsessively play with Suno trying to think about, how do we bring out additional music theory insights just from playing with it, Sometimes I'll run something through like almost 800 times to see if it'll come up with a certain sequence, if it can tell the difference between something catchier versus not. So.
Thank you. Mike, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it's to me, it's an interesting question because I think it's changed a bit my sort of definition of creativity. There's things that I would have thought were creative in the past, but then you're like, I kind of like, because what AI really is doing is pattern matching. It's looking at patterns and it's connecting dots and finding, okay, you asked for this. This is all the different sort of patterns I have of that. Okay, here's one that's kind of like similar to that. And there's more and more things that you're like, this is like creative, and then you're like, oh no, I guess it is kind of like a pattern when you like break it down. Music is a great example. Music is based on a lot of patterns and a lot of math and this scale and this tone and this is this number of hertz apart, and when you do this and so that's where it's the music that Suno can make is insane because it is really just about patterns. Not just about patterns, but it's a big piece of sort of like making music. And so I think it's very tough, but I do agree that the taste part of it is sort of like the humans, at least for now, are good at seeing the novel things that AI creates, that it's sort of like, and asking it to create novel things, that you can ask it to be like, here, this is what I want you to create. This is something that I think nobody has seen. And so the human element is still kind of like there in terms of like using the machine to create something sort of like novel. And so I think I don't know. I think our idea around what creativity actually is going to continue to sort of like change.
I just want to add one thing really quickly, which is that I think what is the difference between these two kinds of skill? And one of them is this question, given a goal, given a definition of the good, given a place I'm trying to go, a thing I'm trying to accomplish, where I know what good looks like, how do I find a consistent good path to getting there? How do I generate that pattern that I know I'm aiming for? And the other question is, given everything that I know how to do and everything I know how to generate, what pattern should I make? What is good? And AI is very good at the first right now, and almost totally unable to answer the second. And the first one I would call convergent intelligence. It is about the truth. It's about converging on the true best way to accomplish a known goal. And the other one I would call divergent intelligence. Given all the truths I know, given my experience of the truth, what do I prefer? What is best? What do I think is good? And I think that what you have to note that's different between those two is that first question is a question that is objective. It's a question about, it doesn't matter, there's no me in it. It's just like, given this goal, it could be someone else's goal, what is the best way? But the other question can only be answered subjectively. There isn't an objective answer. It's like, well, but what is good? That's what we subjectively have to answer together. And so I think I just think it's really important to see that like we are getting so good, and we're going to continue climbing the objective side, but the subjective side is missing something.
I would say it's not purely subjective. A lot of things in art, including especially in music, are what we would call intersubjective value, right? It's like, I'm thinking about those topics like, Bitcoin or whatever, where people are like, it's not real, there's nothing behind it. Well, what gives its value is that there are some properties that all human minds converge upon in some way that give it intersubjective value. And I think music is a really good example of this. Like, we all hear that brainworm thing, and we all react to it the same way, right? It's not just because it's subjective. There is something there that I think is almost like the physics of how our brains are all wired. Something is converged upon, so.
It is subjective. It's deeply subjective,
Yeah.
and it is not arbitrary.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
nothing arbitrary about it. We are at Art Basel makes no sense at all if you think that subjective means arbitrary. How would you? Why? It would just mean the artwork that people like is just something that they happen to randomly. Obviously not. Obviously, it's subjective how you react to art. It's not like there's some like instrument you can build that like it's like Bing. I've measured the number of artilons from this thing. Yet, far from arbitrary, we agree. We find out, not only do we agree with each other, we find out that we, upon our own reflection and experience, decide that our past self was wrong. If it was arbitrary, you would never discover that you were wrong about taste. Your taste would never grow. How could it? It's just arbitrary. It would just change randomly, and yet we grow.
Yuchi,
Hi.
what would you say to people that say good art arises? And let me give some context. There's this kind of view that when you're in a very difficult situation or you're in a compromised social setting, whether that be through an oppressive regime or an oppressive environment, that that is the context in which a lot of great art has come out of. Some people agree with that, some people don't. But what would you say to people that say good art arises only out of constraints?
Yes, I think a lot of good art arises out of extraordinary constraints. I also love collecting women's haute couture fashion, and I think in that case is one where the history of women's clothing has come through a lot of social restrictions on what women can wear in different classes and what that signals and your role in society. And if anything, the designers were even better when they embraced those constrictions and brought extraordinary beauty out of it. I don't want to wear just like a red blob and say, fuck it to all the constrictions or restrictions. I want to see what can be done within those restrictions, because it's also a kind of display and play. But I think the type of artists that I'm most interested in this context are the like radical opposite. Like, I want the people who just like the more power you give them, the more technological capacity you give them, the more possibility you give them, the more they're like, hell yeah, let's go, and they can make something extraordinary. And I think that just requires a certain type of radical open-mindedness, and to this idea that maybe there one day will be a kind of intelligence that can tell you something and kind of expand your own idea of creativity. So it's a very expansive idea.
Mike, is it relevant to your work, this idea of through constraint and through friction comes something profound?
Yeah, I would say it's very relevant to, at least the everydays is I have to make a picture that day. It has to be finished and posted by midnight, and so something's going to come out, and so that is a massive thing, and I very much agree that sort of having more deadlines produces, just more work and sort of like better work. And so
but I mean, does this new medium and this new, to quote Emmett, it's not the projector, it's the actual film material. Does that in itself have certain constraints, or are we entering a new realm where that's not so relevant anymore?
No, there's definitely still constraints,
Yeah.
because there's always that new, better model, and it's like, oh, it was just a little bit better, and it just kind of did that thing, and it kind of listened to my instructions, and I could get this out of it and that. So it's still, which I don't see that. It's hard for me to imagine that not being the case. Like, I just don't see how that could be the case until we're just jacked into the frickin' matrix and our blobs of goo frickin', until then, there's always going to be like, oh, it'd be cool if it had this. And so, yeah.
Even then, like, this idea that becoming
Better goo.
more powerful, better goo. Like, no, seriously, like the idea that you will become more powerful, the idea that you will increase in your skill or technology, and that somehow the constraints will go away. That is a delusion of it's myopic. It's like thinking that because the constraints you have now go away, you won't have constraints. Like, you're just gonna have new constraints. You're still gonna be finite, unless you become God and become infinite. Too bad. Never enough.
Never enough.
Always enough.
Do we, whoever's in charge, do we have time for one more question? Yeah, are we okay? Okay, so look, maybe we were going to end with this following question. Are there new ways to bring the tech world and the art world closer together? And I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, so I always think it has to be possible that sometimes 1 + 1 can equal 11. And to me, living through this time, to quote Yuchi, is the most, I mean, it's scary, but it's also the most exciting time because a seismic change is happening, and we know what happens when that happens. So are there ways that you can imagine to help us bring these worlds together to create something where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? Any one of you first. Go ahead, Em.
The thing about the AI art world today is that the tools we have are being designed, I say this with love because they're my people, by tech people who do not understand that making something easier isn't the same as making something better. And we are missing, the only way we get those tools, I know I can't design them myself, is if you have somewhere where you have people who are great engineers and designers with great artists collaborating as, tightly together to see what they can make together. And I think until that happens, I just don't believe that that's the thing you need to bring. It's like, and it's not global. It's like very local, very. In some number of those, someone's going to figure it out.
Final comments. We've got 1 or 2 minutes left.
Okay, very quickly, I guess when I try to talk to my fellow entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneur friends, I try to tell them of a story that I read. It was written by an astronaut about how when he was studying to go to space, much like a lot of our tech friends right now, obsessing over going into space, he would, at the expense of spending time with his family and at the expense of doing human things on Earth, just obsess over this and study and study. And then once he finally was up in the moon and actually achieved his goal, he was overwhelmed with this extraordinary feeling of melancholy and emptiness. And then he would look down back towards Earth and realize that that's where all the liveliness is, that's where all the beauty and the messiness and the imperfection. And so it was just a very moving passage that sometimes I do share with my fellow tech friends. I do hope that after everyone goes to space, sometimes they'll come down, maybe they'll endow a Frick Museum or 5, But I think this is a very important, thing for all of us to try to do.
Mike, last 30 seconds. Better goo.
Better goo. Let's get that better goo. We want better goo. No, yeah. Yeah, I think that's all it is.
Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for coming. And enjoy the fair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Please join
panelists.
me. Thank you, and please join me in giving a huge hand to our panel. Thank you so much for steering that very dynamic conversation. Alex, thank you for the excellent contributions.